So if you don't know much about Mitch, he was in elementary education for 14 years, and he taught third grade 10 of those years. He's currently working on his PhD in bilingual bicultural education at the University of Texas, Hookham, and he teaches classes there where he is helping students, teachers, learn to do this very thing. So we are very happy to have him join us today. He is married to Molly Ingram. They have 2 sons in our school. So please welcome Mitch Ingram.
Thank you, ma'am. Good morning, everybody. Happy 2020. Hope you're doing well. Is this on? Okay, cool. I've got to hold it really tight, which is weird. I walked in this morning and told Starla I feel really overdressed because people are kicking it pretty casual today. And it's funny because Molly and I had not an argument, but just a difference about what I should wear today. And her last words in the argument, which kind of sealed it, she referenced an 80s dandruff hair, like a shampoo commercial. It's like, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And I was like, I already know these people. What, like, and I kid you not, I was like, okay, it's just late. We have an agreement that we don't talk about like these types of things or like big picture issues after a certain time because our minds are weak. But I went over to, I opened some scripture, and I'm not lying to you. This is what was literally there. It said, "Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is life not more than food, and the body more than clothes?" And so I told her that, and we laughed, and I was like, see, God doesn't care if I wear a tie or not. It doesn't matter, you know? So anyway, I am happy to be here. When Starla asked me to do this, I realized it was kind of like the first time I've actually had the opportunity to synthesize ideas around classroom management. And so it's been kind of a journey. I've been a little obsessive about it, about, you know, like, oh, I need to mention this, and been very prayerful and whatnot. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Mitch Ingram, and Molly is right over here. And this is Noah. He's 6th grade. Dylan is in 4th. Molly is involved in family ministries and traditions and every other thing that this school offers. We normally don't take these types of pictures, but in addition to the 7 Christmas celebrations we had, one of my good friends from Dominican Republic, he was an exchange student back when I was in high school, came with his wife and 3 kids, and we went around and did like things that were Austin-y. I don't know if people in here are from Austin, but like when you're from Austin, I don't really know what to do in Austin, so we went and got a good picture out of it. So anyway, the name of this is From the Depths to the Surface, and when you look at water, sorry, I'm starting off philosophical and stuff. There's a mystique about it because our minds consciously or subconsciously wonder like what's going on. We know there's stuff underneath there, we just don't know what. And our minds kind of get going and imagine all sorts of things. And so I really was asking God, what is it that I should tell these people in the room that know so much already? There's a ton of wisdom and, collectively tons of experience about classroom management. And so I just want to approach this both from the inside, of course, the deepest part of our souls, and then what that looks like on the outside. So I will do that beginning with a case study. And this is going to be a brief autobiography about my own educational journey and how God changed that into me becoming the very person I used to hate. So I will mention this as a caveat. I know there's several of you who teach my children or, your kids or my kids' friends and stuff like that. So just please reserve some discretion because we haven't quite got to these conversations with them yet. Some of them. So anyway, you'll see what I'm talking about here in just a second. This little buckaroo was born in 1976 here in Austin, bred and fed right here. And I went to kindergarten here in South Austin in Cunningham. And of those of you who might remember, in the 80s, there was something called integration, where we were going to solve all social ills by sending people away to different, places around Austin and whatnot. So we moved from Austin to a little old town called Dripping Springs. I don't know if y'all are aware of it. I know Kristen True's from Dripping. Do I have any other Tigers in here? Yeah, oh, that's right. We did talk about that. Good. So I can probably get away with more lies than truths here. This is this next picture is me in third grade. I would say this is the age where my uncle, who's kind of my spiritual mentor, I grew up with a dad that was very involved in his way, but not much spiritual guidance. And my uncle, I remember one night we were in South Austin where he lived, and he was telling us kind of about like end times and Antichrist and stuff. And I was like, I better get saved here because this stuff's pretty scary. But he has been a guiding light my entire life. And so I would say that the Lord saved me at this age. A couple years later, here I am playing the part of a hunter, what you would expect here in or in Central Texas. Like many people around these parts, hunting, fishing, sports, and working were pretty much the only things that we talked about. I mean, like those were the 4 categories. My dad's, to this day, he's getting better, but his solution for everything is that, so-and-so just needs to get a job. That's what would fix it, whatever the problem is. So I played, I went hunting and stuff like that. My kind of embarrassing thing is I've never killed a deer. In my family, that's kind of like shameful. Like that was shameful to admit. I associated hunting with the fact that my dad would leave on the weekends, and my mom would stare out the window and listen to like the Carpenters and like, it's so far away, doesn't anybody stay in, just that kind of negative stuff. And so I had this weird association with hunting. So anyway, again, I'm starting depths here. I might as well just throw it all out there. There's no reason not to. 7th grade, I was nominated, or actually elected as funniest in 7th grade. In case you didn't realize how cool I was, I signed my own yearbook. That's how lame I was. It was about this age, however, this is kind of a turning point, 6th grade really, where I started to become, bless you, the very classroom disruptor that we're talking about here. I had straight A's. I was in all the honors classes. I started kind of speaking back to teachers in ways that were very sarcastic and kind of rude. And I remember coming home after my 8th grade geometry teacher, Mr. Dodson, those of you who remember him, who was not only my 8th grade geometry teacher, but also the mayor of Dripping Springs and a deacon at our church at the same time. And he was saying that I was being very sarcastic and being a jerk, basically. My dissertation topic is about humor, ironically, and some of my 3 findings chapters. One's on how humor allows people to be resilient. The next one is how humor allows resistance, and the last one is how humor allows for resonance among people, to be resonant about stuff. So I'm pulling from my own life story, of course. I found this. I was putting this autobiography together, and I found this next picture. I was looking for my senior one, but I'll tell you why I didn't have that in a little bit. 8th grade. You can see kind of what my feelings are here. I had to cut it off down here. I had like terrible work, like absolutely. And this was hanging in my room, My parents are currently living with us right now because there's like a remodel happening and blah, 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 and they have been the past several months. So it was kind of interesting. I had these like weird feelings because I'm like, this was hanging on my wall, and my parents knew it. My dad was oblivious. I mean, he was there, but not there like this. And I'm like, what would I do if Noah had this up on the wall? You know, I mean, this is my own son. Like, this is kind of problematic. I mean, this is a guy who caught me cheating on a math test right here, and and I don't know why I did this. This is my aunt, and this is a guy she married that's, he got killed. But anyway, so I hated school, right? And here's the other side. It's one of those ones that folds out, and I thought this was cool because I really got, those of you who know me know I love Spanish, and I'm like, I wrote it in Spanish, and then I realized I didn't need like this indirect object pronoun here, and I scratched it out. So it's like I cared about learning, I just hated school, and that's a problem. I think that's a major problem in education in general. So here's the face of the one who hates school. This is my partner in crime right here, Pat Mansky. He's later I'll tell you we became musicians. He's still a musician, and God had other plans for me. I didn't look that crazy. Okay, right? I didn't look that. So here's my senior year, and I'm gonna have to point myself out here. This is me laying across like a corpse, kind of a cadaver-like pose. Let me get in a little closer. And school was pretty much dead to me, right? And so you probably didn't want me in your class. At this point, I was externalizing, issues. The spring semester of my final year, 1995. This is the school newspaper. And so what happened is I got kicked out of school. And so it went pretty big. It's like Mitch Ingram will graduate with the senior class on June 3rd, 90. That was a big deal to get me to graduate. He was denied reinstatement into school and finished his school at an alternative facility. Ironically, it was the alternative facility where Molly was busy being the valedictorian. I didn't know her, of course, but, I had to be shipped short bus over to Hayes. So it was a big issue. That's the school paper. Let me back up. This is the town paper, Dripping Springs Dispatch. Reader says facts in the student's case make a difference. The letter is in response to the rebuttal, and the letter of blah, 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 wrote regarding this is all about me. This is like the community arguing about me. I found this letter to be based on ignorance and arrogance. They applaud the potential destruction of a young man's life, blah, blah, blah. All right, so I'm like, this is starting to get big. Final step, Austin Chronicle gets involved. And so I'm just confused, I'm against everything. I'm like the epitome of anarchy, but like things aren't making sense. So you would think after we got to this height or this depth, whatever you want to call it, I'd pull it together and become like a part of the choir or something, but I didn't, and so I continued on with the garage band. Early college, this is me playing bass in San Marcos with our huge crowd following us back then. Back when Mexico was much safer than it is now, here I am. I just miss that hair, though. That's the only thing. Here I am, just being like, Don Quixote or something, walking around, and this is circa 97 or 98. I wasn't really into time back then, so it didn't really matter. Here's I think that just kind of the culminating picture. This looks like I'm on death row or something. It's really not. This is a failed passport photo. I don't know if you can tell, but there's a bruise right there. It's not because I was a fighter. I was a lover, not a fighter. But someone threw a Frisbee and hit me right there, and so it's... Anyway, so I thought it would be important for me to, that's kind of like my educational journey, to let you know that I've kind of been there on the flip side of it. I'd be the one that you didn't want in your class. And then this is where God kind of stepped in. Remember, I was saved back in 3rd grade, so God, he just doesn't let us go. He's always got a plan even for that. Yahoo, right there. Real fast anecdote. I always bragged about the fact that I was in a band. We were called Locomotives because we were like locomotives, like we had different motives, but it was also like a self-sustaining machine. So I was constantly wearing stuff that promoted myself. And I was thinking about this going to bed last night. I just have to share a quick side anecdote to this anecdotal thing. Anyway, I went to go try to get a job, and you're like, what, a job? You can't make it as a musician in Austin unless you know the right people. So I went to go to TGI Fridays, that restaurant. And I told the lady, I went in looking probably like this, and she was like, what days can you work? I'm like, well, I can't really work on Fridays because our band is taking off, and Saturdays maybe, but we got this Sunday gig. I was trying to impress her with our little bands. And I remember her last question was, she just kind of looked at me contemplatively, and she was like, Mitch, why Fridays? And I was like, well, I already said I can't work Fridays because we have this band thing going. And she's like, okay, we'll get back to you. I was going into my old beat up car, and I was grabbed the hand. I was like, oh, she meant YTGI Fridays, not why Fridays. So I didn't get the job. Bummed. I'm still waiting for the call. I went over to Pharmaco on Ben White to try to do that experimental drug stuff, where they pay you $3,000 a weekend, but you have to give yourself tons of weird drugs. And so anyway, I couldn't pass it because I would faint when they took my blood. So anyway, here's where I was in this band called Soniquete. I kind of cleaned up my acts. In Latin American music, you can't go in looking like a kind of hippie because people don't like that. This dude right here, a flute player from Galicia, northwestern Spain, he was kind of a crazy guy. I'm happy to announce now that he is a praise and worship leader in Madrid. He got his act together, and it's pretty awesome. He was kind of one that, believe it or not, was starting to talk to me about God, and it was I was in a Christian closet, I was I didn't have anybody to really talk about it with, and so I just thought these were kind of some indicative verses about how the Lord is sovereign. If we're faithless, he remains faithful, for he cannot deny himself. And of course, Philippians 1:6, being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. Such a true statement. So I started to become a substitute. Luis, the guy who I just showed you, said, hey, they'll pay $80 a day for you to go work with children. And I'm like, okay, that sounds pretty cool. And so I did that, and I did it for 4 years because I didn't want to commit to anything. The band could take off, blah. And so the reason I actually became a teacher, I started subbing. Everyone knew me, and they were like, actually, I just saw you, Jenny. Jenny Nidell at that time, Jenny Aitchison, I used to sub for her, right? And back in the day, and you remember Mr. Bullock, and people wanted me to, they'd call me in front of the whole school, and they gave me a Mickey Mouse tie, and they're like, hey, will you become a teacher? This kind of thing, putting weird pressure, and I'm like, I don't know. Marissa Grijalva, who you know well and lives in Dripping Springs now, she 1 year just said, hey, would you take my 3rd grade class to start the year I adopted a girl from Mexico? And so anyway, she said, so a month went by and I started the class, and she said, I called her. I'm like, hey, Marissa, I got the class started. Everyone's set. What's up? And she was like, Mitch, I haven't been calling you. I've decided to stay home with my child that I adopted. And I was like, okay, God, I get it. That's my sign. I hung out in 3rd grade for 10 years. And I did, ESL generalist, and then my final couple years were bilingual and dual language. And then now, in another ironic twist of fate, this was last semester. This is my a bilingual cohort at UT, and this was our last class day. We took a picture, and so a lot of my time I spend training teachers about what to do. Now, the majority of the classes I teach are second language acquisition, ESL type stuff. They've never asked me to teach classroom management, and I don't know why. I know like UT's like anti, anything having to do with managing. That's just so colonizing or whatever. But like, so, so it's just interesting, the way it goes. And so my question kind of in this whole process here is, how does one go from this cute little buckaroo to this rebel without a clue? And I kind of wrote down some factors that contributed to my pushback, to my angst, and which I think could be very possible here at a school where, where there are high standards and there's, I don't know, let me just go through them. Internal, I'm not going to go into those because what applies to us today is really the external stuff, the environmental factors. So the facade of perfectionism in a community, or the hypocrisy or not owning things, was an issue for me. I saw adults all the time, and they wouldn't own up to things, and they expected me to be perfect, but they weren't, that kind of thing. Not you have to, but unfair standards, different expectations for, groups, athletes, theater, whatever. This was a big one for me. Not allowing conversations to occur because adults weren't interested in them. It's weird because as we're adults, it's hard for us to go back to ideas that we've already kind of worked through in our head, but it's so important, incumbent, in fact, upon us to walk with our students through some of their exploratory discourse in order to lead them to what is truth, right? To what is veritas. Lack of humility, vulnerability on behalf of adults. My association with Christianity, because we didn't go much to church or anything like that, was mixed up with like conservatism as a singular way of being. And my brother still I've heard him say this before. He's like, well, we're kind of born into this as Christians, like cultural Christianity or something. White, hunter, football, English speaking. My dad kind of made fun of people in church, saying they were dorks. So I couldn't really make connections to my life. Treating women is less, right? I don't even start on that bit. And then my family's glorification of the mischievous things. It was interesting. I got to that like 7th grade, and hey, I'm in honors class is good. You got all the A's, cool. But what we really talked about around the family dinner table when everyone was involved was, how my dad went to Mexico and got in problems or what, like that kind of stuff. And so I urge you parents to be careful making light of something that was difficult. I've already had to talk to my parents about like all these things that we can laugh about right there were actually very traumatic at the time, right? And my dad will kind of bring it in like, yeah, remember when you took the Aerostar and drove to the Rainbow Gathering? And I'm like, stop. You thought I was going to go join a hippie commune for the rest of my life, right? I mean, so, just being aware and discerning with our words and our thoughts are super important. Quick meta moment of this autobiographical introduction. I think it's important for us as teachers to lead with vulnerability, right? I put myself out there in a way, and there's a real strength in it. Of course, Dr. Brene Brown talks a lot about vulnerability, and our students need to see us as vulnerable, I believe. Maybe not this vulnerable, and of course at age appropriate, but it's engaging. Number 2, it engages people into it and humanizes us as people who are teaching them things, right? My kids love to hear about my mistakes and how I got through things, right? And again, we haven't gotten to all of my mistakes yet, but those times will come, right? There's also an aspect of when you do that, you kind of have that credibility, that street cred. It's kind of like another 80s commercial about those people who are losing hair, and the guy was like, I'm not only the president of the hair club for men, I'm also a client. And he just like, okay, you've been there, you've done that. I'm not just preaching this, I've walked it out, right? And then a chance to give God glory in all this. I mean, this is not a glory story for me. It's to point back to Jesus and be like, look, I was completely in the dark, and he led me to the light, which is amazing. All of this is for your benefit so that the grace that is reaching more and more people may cause thanksgiving to overflow to the glory of God, right? Great verse to kind of cap that off. So here's our agenda for conversation as we start. We're going to discuss 3 educational theorists, move into a dance party, and I don't really know where that, we could end up in Cancun for all I know. So really just, I was thinking about who are people that, who God brought to mind. So here's some ideas from 3 educational theorists. Y'all don't think I'm a heretic because I put Jesus there. Harry Wong, I'm looking at it from a prism of pre and during, and then I'm taking Jesus off the time-space continuum. I'll explain it when I get there. All right, this is an idea that God has kind of given me, like when I'm speaking to UT pre-service students or teachers, about zooming in and panning out, right, which is so important in teaching. What are the smallest details of the classroom that can make it a better environment, right? That's zooming in. And then panning out, what is it like coming into this space, right? Like, so I tell my students there to constantly be like, like, what are people doing at this table over here? Okay, now back out. Is everyone getting it, or people sleeping, or whatever? Or are they, like, buying shoes on Amazon? Some of my students, like, are buying shoes on Amazon while I'm teaching, so I'm happy to see that's not happening here. So things to consider, excuse me, are just about pre, during, and post. This is something kind of a matrix we use at UT. What do you do, beforehand? What are you doing, as it's happening? And then what's the post, right? And it's you can either look at it like circularly or like linearly, whatever. Not going to get too much in that. Very quickly, I've heard Harry Wong mentioned a lot around here. Here, like, how many people have never heard of him? Is there anyone that's never heard of him? Okay, a couple people. You never know what people know, so I just kind of start pretending nobody knows anything. So this is something that I tell students to get. You can go to Half Price Books. Harry Wong is a good pre-guy, when it comes to getting things ready. Despite the very kind of awkward or like 80s pics and stuff like that. And then my favorite, let me real fast show you this. This is my favorite. Like, I don't get this. Like, what copy editor let this go? There'll never be a shortage of love. And look at that dude. Like, it's hard for me to sell this this book to people, especially at UT, because it's obviously there's not a lot of love there. And look at this kid. Like, this is... page 78, and so I'm like, what? Despite that, there are some really good principles in there, and it basically comes down to, as we say in Spanish, más vale prevenir que lamentar. It's better to prevent than to lament. Or how you've heard it, one who fails to plan, what? Plans to fail, right? Exactly. This is why I used to hate planning and how justify it to my administrators of why I didn't need to plan, is because we can't see the future. And how am I going to know if I'm introducing fractions, how do I know if they're going to be ready for equivalent fractions if they haven't, how am I supposed to know that? This used to be my excuse, like, to not have to plan. I really am somebody, it's hard to plan because I like to think out every possible scenario, and that immobilizes me when it comes time to deciding, what should I do? What should the next day look like? What should that really still to this day kind of, holds me back when it comes to that. So a couple of categories that he came up with. Class structures, physical. What does your classroom seating arrangement look like, right? Do y'all do assigned seating? And this can go from pre-K to 12. It doesn't matter. How many people, real fast, how many people do assigned seating in here? Okay, yeah, so y'all know what's up. As I always tell my students, freedom is a privilege. If you abuse it, you lose it. Boom. God, it's like, I'm sitting amongst masters in here. Furniture in the classroom. I never, when I was a third grade teacher, I never had a place where I couldn't see everything happening at once, right? I see novice teachers making this common error to where, like, okay, they've got a little nook, cool, but as long as you can see the nook. This is where my small group table is over here, I don't want something where the kids are going to be behind because they're going to be there, right? Placement of the clock, If I have a clock behind me while I'm speaking, what are you constantly doing? counting down, like, when's he going to be done? Oh, my gosh, I'm hungry, you know, whatever. Lights, here at this facility in particular, I've noticed that if I dim them, there are 2 sets of lights in the room I teach in, and the middle one, if I have a PowerPoint, it needs to be off because they can't see it well, right? You need to, like, facilitate every little thing to make sure it's a decent, just simple environmental stuff, right? Sound, like volume, are you speaking loud enough? What's the sound? You know, I always have music playing when people come into my classroom. Not to say you do, but that's just something that happens, right? Rules and routines. What are your class rules? This is Harry Wong and just basic stuff. Keeping it simple, not the don't, like don't do this, don't do that, don't do that, blah, blah, blah. But keeping it real simple. These are my 4 as a teacher. Be cooperative, be responsible, be kind, and they all knew my biggest one was be truthful. Just 4 things, because everything can nestle real nicely up underneath that. Do students know what they are to do as they enter or leave? It's like, Harry Wong was a real big one about this. When they come to your room, is there just kind of free time and stuff, or can they just talk? What does that turn into after a while? Or is it get on a what he called bell work, like by the bell you need to be done by, and then is there a closure kind of thing as you leave, right? Again, I'm just giving you stuff you probably already know. Communication, is our language comprehensible? We assume that people understand what we're saying. Maybe it's not. This is one a little phrase I came up with, winding it up and letting it go. Do we repeat ourselves enough? Sometimes we think that just because we say it means that everybody heard it and everybody understood it, which is a major fallacy, right? So what I'll sometimes do, again, this is with the younger, and you can do it with the older too. I'll do it with 6th graders. Like, okay, what did I just say we're supposed to do? All right, and pass it to somebody. Okay, all right, what did he just say? What did he just say? And just when you see like some people not paying attention over here, get them to reference each other, right? There's a power in harnessing the community that's there. Speed of language, that's a big one in ESL. When we're teaching ESL, as many visuals as possible, as Ellen mentioned earlier. That's like getting students to repeat. How do we express our disappointment or irritation? This is big. Like a lot of the new teachers are like, I just don't, I'm not used to being upset in front of people, right? Like, are you going to use the I'm really sad? I mean, I don't know if anyone here uses, I'm really sad that this is happening. A lot of times with the younger kids. Sometimes, with the way I do it is just, I can't say I'm really sad because I'm really not sad. I'm more annoyed. And so I just kind of level with my students, like, dude, what are you doing? You're being, you're being selfish. There's a lot of people here trying to learn. Nonverbals are important. So just real fast, and then I'm going to give you some more time just to chat because I'm doing the exact thing I'm just talking against. I'm convinced that there are 2 types of competing theories. One is called linguistic competence. The other one's called communicative competence. Linguistic or grammatical competence is like, is our syntax correct? Which is important. Is our morphology, blah, blah, blah. And then communicative competence is something we don't teach. Like the reason why Molly and I were disagreeing last night about what I was going to wear today was we were having issues of communication. It's not that we were not using correct syntax. We were both speaking English. We had all the right we had all the right linguistic tools. It was more we were missing each other, right? So real fast, I want you to look at someone next to you, see if you can do this seriously, and give your I've had enough look to your student. Like, what does it look like? And are they picking up what you're laying down? No laughing. All right, I'm going to reel you back in real fast because I'm going to let you go in just a second. Sorry to, y'all are, I have a couple of them. This is the one that I remember a fifth grade PE coach was just like, he'd always cock his head, he'd have his coffee, like the epitome of not being healthy the entire time. Donuts, coffee, and he'd do this thing. He'd look at me like that. I'm more just, mine is like this. Like I said, no, I just kind of like, what are you doing, Like that kind of thing. And this is sixth grade boys I teach, so, there are different ways. I mean, I don't know. Because I was raised with guilt and my mom used sadness a lot, I'm kind of against the one. She was like, if you don't eat the carrots, they're going to cry. I'm like, are they going to cry when I'm smashing them between, that kind of stuff. So I'm kind of like, there's something visceral inside when people are like, I'm just really sad you didn't do that. I mean, like, that's heavy. Anyway, long term anyway. So this is one I asked. This is one I added. This is not Harry Wong. This is just stuff I kind of came up, or, some of it is, it doesn't matter. What is it like coming or living in our rooms? Do we receive our students at the door? That picture of the classic picture of Harry Wong. He's there and he's got his tie and he's dressed professionally and he's like giving everybody. I do the little fist bump when they come in, just to, acknowledge for, talking about what Ellen said about like tactile. I mean, that's maybe hitting that. I don't know. Do our students have buy-in or ownership of the community? Right? Is this my class or is this our class? Right? It's tiring to make it just my class. So the more I can get them to give me feedback and kind of inform the curriculum even, the better, right? That they, anyway, I'll get back to that another time or a little bit later. Can students, I'll do it right now. So choosing a call to attention, let me see if I think I've got these things right here that you can get on Pinterest or whatever. Does anyone have a good cheer or a way they call their class? Let's do calls to attention first. How do you get your kids' attention? Do you do that? Give me 5, or what do you do? What do you say? Anyone? Dun, dun. Okay, that's cool. What do you do?
I go, and pay attention.
Dude, it works. Totally works. I do, because I've worked at Odom so long. We used to the general school one was, and by the way, it would serve us well as a school to have a universal one, because if everybody uses that vertically, then it's, at Odom, for example, it was Odom, Eagles, So what I do with my kids and here are Veritas, Valiant, and I know we're the defenders, but like there's the Valiant thing there, so that was kind of confusing too. But modeling mistakes and how to handle them is so incredibly important. These kids are come from type A, parents that are achievers, and mistakes can't be tolerated. And this is another problem with UT is that nobody can make mistakes in spelling. They're all approximations, and we have these different ways to say it, but it should be that it's a mistake. So what? Everybody makes mistakes. Now let's move on, right? Celebration claps. Does anyone want to model anything they have when something's done well? Do y'all know the disco cheer? It's you did a good job. You did a good job. Tiny clap happens when it's like everybody's too loud and you want them to shut up, but you need to celebrate something. So you're like, all right, tiny clap. Again, this is a lot of times for the youngers, but I do it in college, and they're totally into it, and they actually write their own. After I have a plastic bag, and my secretary or whoever's for the day, the cheerleader, will pull them out, and then they'll start writing their own. And people at UT, they'll get into it. And again, these are future teachers, so they're totally into this sort of stuff. They're like, okay, elephant clap. That wasn't, it had nothing to do with celebrating, but they did it, so whatever, more power to them. Trucker cheer is, good job, good buddy. Random. Nicknames. Do you use nicknames in your class? Again, these are ways to build ownership, build community. Do we also exude the kind of attitude we expect from our students? Right? We'll get to that. Let's see. All right, so now you get a chance with some music and to chat, because I've been blathering at you too long. This is Harry Wong's administrative kind of housekeeping things to take care of, which is a really good list, by the way. I used to open up to section C of the book before starting every year teaching, and it was very helpful. But I added a couple to the side that might be, when you're talking about procedures and having things in plan, having plans in place, what do you do with this, right? So Troy's gonna, as a DJ up there, gonna spin some tunes, and I also, by the way, when I do group work, I measure it by songs, not by time. I'm like, all right, we get 2 or 3 songs to do this, and if something like Inagata Davida, the 28-minute Iron Butterfly, or Stairway to Heaven, not that I play that, but anyway, hit it and get us 2 songs, and we'll come back. Ready? Exercise. Choose. Oh, did I tell you what to do? Duh. All right, and that's how you were procedural. Choose one of these ideas, and tell them how you, choose one of these, like being a good winner, being a good loser. Do you have a plan in place for that? If you don't, what could it be? And how, you already know how it contributes. Maybe you don't. How does that contribute to having a good structure, right? God is a God of structure as well as he is free will. So does that kind of help? Just choose one of those and talk about it. Ready? Hit it. Can you get something a little bit more upbeat, dude? This is like funeral stuff. Does it pick up?
Come on, I guess I'm just a misfit, huh? Yeah.
That's what I'm screaming.